Thank you, everyone. So welcome, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us today, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Phoebe Kiboy, Gender Lead at BFA Global, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar on innovating and investing at the Gender Climate Nexus in Africa, a topic that we can all agree is both timely and essential. So I want us to get right into it, but before we begin, I'd love to extend a heartfelt thank you for our partners who've made this work possible. That is a Catalyst Fund and BFA Global, and with the generous support of FSD Africa, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the Global Environment Facility. So today you'll hear from a range of startups and innovators and investors at the forefront of this particular topic. We ask that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. As you can see, I think on your slides, there's also a Q&A, but please feel free to put them on the chat. We also have an incredible team on standby who will respond to any issues you face during the webinar. So feel free to just put your comments there and we'll get right to you. We'll just get right started. So thank you all. So to start us off, we are going to have a conversation started by Mary Kagashinki, who is the manager of early stage finance ecosystems at FSD Africa, and we're delighted to have her sharing a few opening remarks. So thank you and welcome, Mary.
Hi, Phoebe. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. It's Mary Kashangaki, manager early stage finance. I know it's a tough name, so it's all right. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to join you all today discussing this really exciting piece of work that's been put together by our partners, BFA Global, alongside UNIDO and team. When we launched this partnership with Catalyst Fund and BFA Global around building climate resilience solutions, we call it Catalyzing Climate Resilience. We launched about 3 years ago. We really thought intentionally about how we're going to include women, ensure that they're included as part of the founders in the program, ensure that we think about them not just as beneficiaries, but really builders of the climate resilience solutions. And I think this piece of work really does a great job of showcasing, real examples of what it means, why we need to include women as leaders, as builders. And it offers a really useful set of insights about how women are building these solutions because they really understand the challenges. Women are the builders, women are the clients, and they're really kind of at the center of building climate resilient solutions. I'm not going to go on for a long time. I just really want to put my stamp of approval, FSD Africa's stamp of approval behind this really useful work that's been done. And I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. So handing over back to you, Phoebe and team.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. And it's a pleasure to have you here. So to get us started, we thought we'd take a few minutes just to go through some of the key highlights that came out of the report that we are mentioning over and over again, and that you will have a chance to read towards the end of the session. Now, we started by asking ourselves two central questions. How are African climate startups actually delivering resilience benefits for women? And what does this actually mean for their businesses? Then to our investors, we wanted to understand, how do you capture both financial returns and resilience dividends by backing these particular startups? To do this, we opted to do qualitative research with 7 startups, that is Farm to Feed, AgroSupply, Mazao Hub, Medicare, Bekia, Keep It Cool, and Anako, some of whom you'll be hearing from today, and they come from a range of sectors. And with them, we wanted to explore how are they actually serving the women by looking at the product and service design and just how they're generally structured. From the investors, we also went wide with this, but we wanted to understand from those with a gender and climate focus, looking at catalytic funders and impact funders such as Kawisafi, Catalyst Fund, MC Socap, and Altri Capital. exploring how they've actually gone through gender lens investing. So a lot of what we'll be discussing today will be based on practical insights that have come from having these conversations with this particular set of people. So I will talk about two key things that stood out to me, but there's a lot more in the report, and we ask that you all go ahead and read it. One is that we found that startups acknowledge that women drive stronger loyalty, higher adoption rates, and all the good stuff that we've had from a couple of webinars, I'm sure, throughout when talking about this particular sector. However, deeper though, we notice that they still frame it particularly from an impact perspective rather than a business strategy. And that was really interesting, despite them understanding the benefits of having women as customers and agents. Then another thing we notice is that those who are actually driving the best results are solving for time and mobility burdens for these women, right? And in doing so, we see that they're fueling resilience and also building their own businesses. So two recommendations that I thought I would discuss today is one, we designed with women, not just for them, right? We have to co-create if we want to make sure that these solutions are aligned with where women are, what their constraints are. And there's a lot of free tools that we came across while doing this work that can actually support startups to do this. The other one is the importance of data. I know that has been mentioned over and over again, but this remains such a big gap still. And it's not just basic data on who's using your product. We have to go deeper. We have to look at customer acquisition costs. We have to look at lifetime value and retention rates by women. This enables startups and any other company to see how they can build a strong commercial case on investing in women by having this gender disaggregated data, even on the other metrics across the organization. For the investors, I'll just go directly to the recommendations because they talk a lot as well into the insights. One is intentional sourcing. We have had that investors will practically say that, getting the right people is really difficult. But we've seen that being intentional in your sourcing could have a really big element of attracting the right women-led startups to your pipeline. So it's in looking for them where they are, where in the sectors where women are active, both as startup leads, but also as the women on the other side of that, right? We also notice that it's important to include male-led ventures as well, because some of them drive real impact for women. So they should be assessed based on their ability to deliver benefits for women. Next one is applying bias-free and standardized evaluation. One key thing we hear a lot is that female-led startups do tend to have more biased questioning that goes to them versus those which are male-led or mixed. So the idea here is apply a consistent gender-neutral criteria to assess these companies so that we make sure that we are looking at them from the same lens and not creating extra biases or making sure that it's a bit fair when it comes to access to capital. So those are some of the key ones, but we have significantly more in the report. And I do ask that everyone please go and make sure that you read that report and do share your comments when you do. So without further ado, I'd love to just directly go into the heart of today's conversation, which is with our panelists. So let me first start by introducing our startup representatives, who are Alexandra Geiser, who is the business and partnerships lead at Mazao Hub. We have Claire Van Enck, who is the founder and CEO of Farm to Feed. Great. We have Melis Carraro, who is a managing partner at Catalyst Fund. And we have Chukwebuka Amaji, who's an investment analyst at Kawisafi Ventures. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And I'm really looking forward to getting your insights, and I hope everyone is. Again, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. So as a means to get us started, I'll just go around and start with a hard question. How can we move from gender intentional approaches being seen just as impact work to becoming core business and investment strategies? And what kind of results can be expected from this shift that you've particularly seen? So maybe I'll get started with Alexandra, if you could go first.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Thank you all for joining. That is a very thought-provoking question. We have seen for some time that is how it has been. When you talk about women in your company, when you talk about how you try to include them in your solutions, it's seen on the side, like the side package that is meant to deal either with PR in perception and things like that. So it has been, since women are put into the special group, everything that is tailored is seen as impact work and not solely as a strategy. So I think by looking at things from the core of it, I mean, when we say we are touching women, how, I remember I saw this quote by Jack Ma saying that if you want to build, he admitted that most of his success was brought about by engaging more women in building his company. This is so, and they say that the impact is brought by the culture that women bring into the business. So when you look into the core, how can this culture or strong culture in a company touch productivity, touch profitability? When you go that deep, is how we get is when you get to see how women can contribute and can be aligned into business strategy and not just impact. So I believe, looking at the core of things, we are still at the we are still shallow, but when we go more deep, when we go with figures and see before the engagement of women and after the engagement of women, the productivity that has raised, the profit, the scalability, is when we'll get to know that this women cannot be put only on the impact bracket, but as a strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for that. Really interesting work, as in obviously bring out that leadership element and also the data. So maybe I'll go to Claire with the same question. How do we move it from being seen as impact to being part of the core business?
Thanks, Phoebe. I think if we, for me, and thanks for having me. I think we have to look at data. I think the research shows that even looking at female-founded companies, that the returns are actually higher on average than having a male-only founded company, right? If you look at countries where gender equality exists, those countries are always wealthier. The economic returns are just incredibly clear that it's not just an impact decision, it's a very much a commercial decision. I mean, every research time and time again shows that. Now, if I look at my own work, female founded, of course, I find it incredibly important to have mixed teams. I can see teams collaborating better. I see different perspectives. If I look at where our impact lies, which is smallholder farmers and improving their livelihoods, 80% of smallholders in Kenya are women, and we never discuss that so much. And I think only 25% of them own their land, which is just, and we keep on saying, like, how do we uplift female founders? If we would just say, how do we uplift farmers, right? And then one of the core issues there is that 80% of them are women and only 25% of them own their land. I think it's a very easy, simple problem to define. To solve is another issue. So I think just looking at numbers and data, it's incredibly clear that gender inclusivity is just a commercial decision. It is not an impact decision. It is a commercial decision. That would be my take.
Fantastic. I think that's a really great sentence that you said there at the end, that it's just a commercial decision, gender equality, and we'll dig deeper into that. So maybe I'll go to Maylise as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's music to my ears to actually hear Claire and Alexandra saying it so clearly, because for us, this has been at the center of our investment thesis. We, as a fund, have a gender target. Like, as you know, we're an early stage venture fund and venture builder investing in climate adaptation and resilience across Africa. And we know that women are typically at the front lines. They're leaders in climate action, right, within their communities. And we see that in mobility, we see this in agriculture, we see it in water, like all critical sectors that we invest in. So I think, you know, if we want to, for gender intentional approaches to really move from being in this bucket of impact work to core business, then leaders of startups, founders have to see it as a commercial proposition, and investors have to see it as a source of alpha. So it's actually a source of returns and a risk mitigation strategy, not a side benefit, not an impact flag, right? And I think, again, the data from our research is very clear. Startups that design for and with women demonstrate higher product adoption, stronger customer loyalty. There's higher repayment rates, especially in the financial services sectors, greater revenue predictability often, stickiness. And for investors, therefore, that translates into more predictable growth patterns, lower churn, you know, scalability. So basically higher returns on impact and higher returns on capital. And that's exactly what we're trying to do in the way we shape our portfolio and the way we also tell the story to our investors. Like, this is a financial decision and it's a strategic decision for LPs to blend impact with financial returns.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great take as well. So Chukwabuka, you've had a lot about this being a commercial decision. Do you agree? And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think everyone has summarized it. I think for us, what we've seen is that we need to move from making it about impact, and it's about the market and economic realities. And when we look at the emerging markets, for example, we see that the emerging market is really driven by MSMEs. And who drives MSMEs? It's the women that are the center of this sector of the economy, and they are the frontline distributors, the household economic managers. And when we move and see that at the end of the day, it's a market and economic reality, then essentially you have to support women-led businesses. And there was a business we had looked at in the past, which was material handling, forklift, and they realized that for when they started this business, there was no women came on board, and that makes sense. I mean, you don't see women trying to manage forklifts, but then they began to train women, and they had 0 accidents. So it became a commercial decision that it's even better for them to employ women. In the long term, the LTV is even better if you have women as your drivers as opposed to men. So for the business, it became an economic decision. They began to train women, and essentially, yeah, they're able to meet that impact target. So when we move from seeing it as just an impact add-on and a market and economic reality, then we're able to achieve both at the end of the day.
Great story there. That was really interesting to find out about forklift driving women. So thank you all for your initial thoughts. I think there's a consensus here, and it's great to see, but it also leads to that question, which we'll get to towards the end, on then why are we not seeing change if we all agree on this, right? But before we get there, I have just a couple of questions maybe to each one of you, maybe starting with Claire. We've heard that it's important to show that business value of serving women. And you have just recently closed an incredible round, so congratulations on that. What have you learned about using data or evidence to tell that story more impactfully or powerfully to investors or partners that really showcases that value in investing in women?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say 2 things about that. I mean, I'm also going to be honest, I have really encountered a lot of gender biases, also raising the previous round, and I'm incredibly proud that we've been able to close this round. That being said, it's been amazing that all the funds that have come on board, most of them, 80 to 90%, were led by women. The funds were led by women. So I almost wanted to post something LinkedIn, and so I'm being very transparent, saying this is amazing. I would like to invite some men-led funds to my cap table, because at the moment it's not. So you do see that women invest in women because women truly believe this. But I'm not seeing the same traction, and I'm hearing this from other female founders as well. Founders talk amongst each other, where we also share. Don't waste your time here or here because there's a bias. And I think really to make this conversation, I'm not answering your this directly because I don't think we're there yet. And I think the conversation has always been around how do we empower women founders, because they need to be more bold, or they need to present themselves better, or they need to present their numbers differently. And I don't think that's the case. I was very equal in my previous job as a management consultant, where I was the boldest. And suddenly here I was being treated as something very different. And it was also humbling. But I would rather have this conversation more around, from an investor perspective, how can we break down the biases on the investors, right? Investing in women, and also investing in women of color, because the female founders that I know that are Kenyan struggle even more, and the numbers say that as well. So I would like to open that conversation much more. Because I do think it's harder as a woman to raise around for a lot of women, and we've been very lucky. But to have great supporters like Catalyst Fund, and have catalytic supporters who really rally the ecosystem. But if you don't have that access, let me pause there. I'm sure maybe someone wants to respond to maybe this controversial thought.
I actually have a slight follow-on question, because that's really interesting and amazing to hear that 80 to 90% of your round was raised by women. Did, in the process of getting that investment, because it's not something that we see quite often, how much of the work that you're doing played a role in getting these women to engage with you? You've already said that 80% of agriculture is obviously labored by women, but 20%, as in there's a massive gap there. Did any part of that play a role in how you were able to present that story to them? Did that help in attracting the women founders, or did that deter?
For sure. No, for sure. And the story of impact, of course, is really important. And I also know that people want to invest in women, right? So having a good business case. So yeah, for sure that it helped, but I think the interest in being able to invest in women founders was there, right? Because the funders I approached were all women themselves, or had a woman on their team, and knew the strong importance of doing that. But what I also want to say, it wasn't important for all the investors. That story was not important for all the investors. And I think that's where we can do more to make the ecosystem more aware that how important it is to invest in women, both in the company and, of course, the beneficiaries of the company.
Okay, incredible. Thank you so much. And I'll probably give some space for someone to rebut that in a later stage, but thank you for that insight. I'd love to move towards Mazao Hub. So Alexandra, you did mention something when we started, that when you look at women, we tend to put them in this particular bucket. You're also in the agriculture space, which is, I know, a bit hard, especially when women do not own a lot of the assets associated with it. But you have managed to build initiatives like Her Farm, Her Story, right? And I'd love to understand from your perspective, how does initiatives like this, which are helping to bring more visibility to these women and more equitable income sharing, between them and the people who do own the land, when you look at this, what kind of results have you seen from this? How has that affected the behavior of the women itself, and what has really stood out to you from those initiatives?
Thank you so much. I would love to share a brief overview of what the initiative does, how it was born, so you clearly get what we're doing. So Nazal Hub is a data-driven agronomy service provider. We act like the health sector, but for farmers and for farming activities. So we have established agricultural clinics in 15 regions in Tanzania, where farmers can walk in and receive soil testing services, agronomy support, input facilities, all at this clinic or one-stop shop. So from that short explanation, you already know that the operation mostly take place in rural areas where our farmers are located. So since I'm also involved with the operations, most of the time I go there to see how it goes, how business is taking place. And while I'm there, I meet women. I connect with women, I engage with women, they tell me stories. And I remember one day meeting with this woman called Mama Bao. She came in for pesticide, and too bad we didn't have it. So I told our extension officer to get it from another shop. So that gave us room to conversate. She talked about her practices. The conversation even went deep. She even shared about her family encounters, family babies, and whole family situations. I was moved. So we started engaging. We exchanged numbers, and I told her, in case you face any trouble with your activities or anything, just be free to call. So that was early last year. By early of October, she called, and this woman was sobbing. Why? Because all the hard work uh, went to vain. Because the harvest time came in, the rightful owner of the land, means of production, was the husband, who turned out to be a drunkard. So all the money was, he just disappeared from the household. You see, and this woman was working so hard. Our extension officers know this woman. She has been there from day one, planting and doing everything. So you see, even when climate shocks happen, different situations, women do not have safety nets. And we said, how can we include them? How can we make them visible through our solutions? Now, since we have farm ERP system that is used to collect data, uh, and women were not so much recorded, especially the ones who do not own the means of production, we decided to put women in groups. They are called Queen of the Farm. Now, these are all activities under the initiative called Her Farm Story. We put them in groups called Malkia wa Shamba, Queens of the Farm, each group comprising 15 to 25 women. Up to this moment, we have about 48 in 3 different regions. In these groups, we get to record all the activities that they do into their collective farms. We can't take them away from their family land because that could cause clashes. But what is something that they can do? They can put aside few hours to do collectively. We help them establish these collective areas where they farm together, and we provide them with close climate agronomy support, climate smart support. And through our system, they get integrated pest management systems. We advise them on the best varieties to use, all to make sure that with the less they have, they can have much yields. So that is what we're doing. We are also helping them engage with financial institutions. We currently um, officialized our partnership with CRDB Foundation, but we have been engaging for a very long time. And some of these officers have met these groups. So they managed to open bank accounts for them. So women are now visible. They have bank accounts, official bank accounts. Their groups also have bank accounts, and this will help them get collateral free loans because our partner, CRB Foundation, has a program called Imbeju, which only through data, leveraging data, they provide collateral-free loans. And women could not access this before because they were not in groups. Their data wasn't in place. So now they get access to the loans. But together with that, they get financial trainings. They look at themselves as businesses, serious business women. It's not just farming to eat, it's farming to create a safety net, and then grow that safety net into, a business, an ongoing business, you see. So together with that, there are also other trainings that we provide them, especially on land rights. And this is for women who lose their husband, widows who do not know how to navigate these issues, value addition, but also entrepreneurial skills. So what I got from all this experience is that they needed that seed to be planted. They have the potential, they'd love to do more, but where do they get the inspiration? Who is there to tell them, you too can do it on your own? So that way is how we got to include them. And I see the difference on how they carry themselves. To men in their communities, we make them understand that this is not here to create, there are people who look at it like we are trying to make women feel superior to men and things like that. But no, this is all to create safety nets. When unforeseen incidents happen, where can these women turn to and say, this can help me? Not all women were lucky to have stable family or stable partners, and some are even widows. So if you see a woman getting into the farm, carrying a hoe and doing it herself, it means there are forces that have driven to these circumstances. Nobody would like to do that. And when we talk of facilitation, most of the people know that women maybe cook, take care of the household, but all this, when you look at it from a different angle, support these their spouses to concentrate into their farming activities. So even if they're not directly in production, they're facilitating it at the back. There are these Mama Mboga, Mama Ntilie, they are around farming areas. So in case those workers finish working, they get food directly, you see, and they even place themselves there strategically. So without taking much time, I believe I have shared in a nutshell what the initiative does through Mazal Hub and how we are, and the moments that stood out to me and how we are making a difference for women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I think there's so much to unpack there. You've talked about data, you've talked about credit, you've talked about the importance of that mental element as well for them to start seeing themselves as business owners. So I'll maybe pick on the data one as we move towards Maylise. We know that from the investor perspective, data is required. We've seen those requests to the startup founders, but measurement can be tricky, especially for the kind of people that, Alexandra or Claire are working with, right? So how do you tackle this particular problem? How do you approach gender and climate outcomes and requiring that data, but in a way that's not burdensome for the organizations that you're working with? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. That is the question. And thanks to both Claire and Alex for sharing so candidly. That was really powerful. I'm still taking in that story, Alexandra. We should tell it more often. But back on data. So as you said, to really measure things, it has to be practical and not a burden. And that means finding the right reporting structures and even supporting, frankly, founders in collecting data and building the infrastructure, the muscles to do that in ways that align with their business model and that make sense, again, from a business perspective, right? So we, for example, have a system where we digitally track metrics from our portfolio on a quarterly basis. It was fully digitized from the beginning so that we could standardize and simplify the data entry for founders. And also, once the data is in, we support and we check and verify, like, does this make sense? That if it doesn't, we have calls with founders to try to understand where the data is coming from, if fixes are necessary. But generally speaking, we only ask for metrics that align with the core business metrics of the startup. So around growth, retention, employees, revenue, obviously, like funds raised after us, etc. So we use the 2X global framework to understand where, especially what levers we can measure to understand gender inclusivity. So that looks, for example, at the breakdown of users who are women, the breakdown of potentially agents or partners that work in distribution who are women, that's more the supply chain side, the breakdown of employees who are women at the startup level, and then leadership and governance, right? Because it's very important to see at these various levels to understand how deep the companies are thinking about the inclusivity lens. And so we typically start with a few indicators. Maybe they will grow over time as the companies develop their systems. For example, Mazao Hub is also tracking things like additional income, like income resilience for the farmers, and that's disaggregated, as Alexander was saying, in terms of women farmers and male farmers. And that level, of course, it's one level deeper in terms of understanding the impact on the ground. And when we can't do that, because it's not in all cases, we also rely on third-party partners. Think your 60 decibels, for example, who could do qualitative research, calling customers, understanding the impact of solutions in their lives to face climate shocks, for instance, to increase their income, to decrease volatility, to benefit overall their family, etc. Those are things that are a level deeper and require, I think, a qualitative touch. So we've done that with 60 decibel. We've done that also via our own tool. We actually built a chatbot that can be delivered on WhatsApp. And so it's a set of questions that can be given to the users of the startups to better understand what is going on when they use the product, and if they face shocks or not. Are they more resilient now, more than before? And that data can also be disaggregated by gender. So it's a mix of data points. I think it's important to have various vantage points to tell the right story, because it's never as simple as what you receive. So it's good to validate and probe. But generally, again, gender or climate data needs to be perceived as growth intelligence for the businesses, just like Claire and Alex were saying, and not just compliance. And I think that mindset shift and alignment between the investors and the founders is really important.
Amazing. Absolutely love the mix of using innovative solutions and also external sources to support the data that you are getting from the startups to now build a better case for yourself. So that's great. Maybe moving to Chukwuebuka. You have, as Kavi Safi, been experimenting a bit with blended finance, and I know you also do quite a lot of technical support for the companies that you do deal with. So when you think about your portfolio, we've heard about a lot of interventions. So what kind of interventions do you see have made an actual difference? And how do you see women step up as leaders through your work?
Yeah, and start by saying broadly that in CloudSurface portfolio, we've seen women become powerful adopters and leaders when we intentionally blend capital with gender insight and technical assistance. So those are the three things we try to do. Yeah, we need to bring in capital, but also we need to have data-driven gender insights, as unbiased as possible, and then we back it up with some technical assistance. And first, our investment thesis, we invest in a place that is sort of in that gender climate nexus. So we invest in clean energy and climate smart technologies. And what we've seen is that even though men may make the actual purchase of assets, we've seen that research has shown that women determine up to 90% of household energy consumption. So that means we have to invest in companies that sort of designed for the people that would use this 90% of the time, the people that would ensure stickiness. And we've also seen that even on a community level, women determine up to 60% of energy. So if we're going to invest in this nexus, we have to always think about the women. So even if we're going to invest in a business that may not
Is it my connection?
No, I think we lost him.
will determine whether there is going to be stickiness. So that's the first thing we do. And that means in our portfolio, naturally, we would capture in that gender aspect, whether or not we think about it. Secondly, in the investment process, we use lean data and evidence-based assessment to understand each company on various gender metrics. So to understand where the gaps are. And it's not really a rigid approach of, you need to do this or else we don't invest. Yes, we want to invest in businesses that think about gender equity and all that, but it's a collaborative approach. We have to understand where they are, why they are where they are, and really what do they need and how do they mature over time. And we have our quarterly report, and in the quarterly reports, we have all our portfolio companies report on, you could say, the financial metrics, but also on the impact metrics. And at the end of every year, we do like a deep dive where we could contract with the 60 decibel or whatever to do really a deep dive on this company. I don't know, we present it to the company and say, yeah, this is how you've performed on an impact perspective, on a gender perspective. These are where we think you can improve upon. And then comes in the technical assistance. How do we help you to improve this? And that's what companies have always shown, that we've never had a company that was not keen on improving. It's all about, hey, can you support me? Can we do a 50-50 split? You say that management is not fully aware about some gender, whatever, and there's a need for management to go through some gender education. Will you pay for this education? Can we split it 50-50? Or you could say, so that's why we come on board with technical assistance to understand what the company needs. And most times we'll split the cost between us and the company, or we could, support that progression. It could be in the HR capacity or providing some training for women. We've done something with a company called Installer, for example, Install Her, so which is a solar company that trains women to then go ahead and be solar installers or panel installers and all that. Yeah. And we've collaborated with them, even though they are not a portfolio company of ours. And we've seen companies like BioLite show how, helping them train some of their women have helped advance the business, or Bboxster has, explained to us how the various technical assistance we've provided to the managers have helped provide more insight on diversity and all that. So I think that's really where we play, is that we're playing a field that women are the core of the business, whether we invest in companies that have women or not. And secondly is that we have this unbiased gender lens analysis before we enter and why we are in the business, which is done repeatedly from the quarterly ones to the annual deep dives. And then we share this with the companies and we have that discussion. So at the end of every report, we try to have a conversation with the company and say, okay, this is what we found out. And we've seen companies perform better over the years. So that's really how we combine that, you could say, that robust investment thesis. So understanding women's role in energy, and then having that intentional investment process, and then tailoring technical assistance to what suits the company. And it's not, so we've understood that we can't force the companies to do this. And we've also seen that we do not need to force companies to do this. They would naturally do this. Like we said at the beginning, this is a commercial and economic story. If you do this thing the right way, there's going to be more money for everyone on the table. And that's really, yes, we want to make impact and all that, but it has to be sustainable. So if we can show that sustainability and the financial aspect, people also would conform. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. It's not easy, but yeah, we're getting there one company at a time and one day at a time.
Okay, great. Nothing good is easy, right? So that's great to hear. And I think one thing that you've mentioned that has really stood out for me in terms of the interventions is how flexible your support seems to be, right? As in, it seems like a real partnership between yourselves and the startups that you support. And I think that goes a long way in building those organizations to where they are today. You've also mentioned about, building for that 90% of women who are making that decision. And that is incredible to me, which kind of leads to my final question. We've talked about stats. Everyone has said we need to invest in women. The business case is there. It's mentioned everywhere now. We know it. And yet we're still here because the investments in this women, in the women-led startups, but also in supporting the women on the ground is still abysmally low. So my final question, maybe to go around all of you, I'll start with Alexandra, is what's happening? Why are we not seeing, that much traction on this? What's holding the ecosystem back? Yet we know there's a business case here to invest in women. So I'll start with you, and I'll give each one of you just 1 minute to go through your responses.
Thank you, Phoebe. So, what is stopping us? It's us. We are stopping us. I mean, the attention of it, even if you have the data, even if you can prove that women can play this role, we still look at it like it is not something that everyone will give attention to. It's not that necessary. I mean, even if it's not there, no one is going to notice. If we start shining light into that more in everything that we're doing in our startups, in our companies, it doesn't matter what we're doing. If we shine the light and give it the spotlight that it needs and show how it can make a difference commercially, especially in our businesses, and stop hiding it back, it's going to make a very big difference. So everyone shine the light where you are.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Claire?
Yeah, I think I've already said it. I think we need to reverse the conversation a bit and really look. I know there's this great study that Village Capital did. Village Capital did, and they made a toolbox. They did a research that looked at the questions that investors would ask women founders or companies. There's different things here anyway, but let me just focus on the women founders investing in women. But and they saw that the origination questions were much more risk orientated when they ask women founders and opportunity orientated when they ask men founders. And there's a bias here, right? I think I struggle having this conversation because there's a power dynamics between founders and investors. If I feel bias in a conversation, I wouldn't call it out because I don't want to burn bridges and I don't want to seem like that woman that still exists. So I think what's holding us back is being able to talk about this. It's still a bit taboo, right? To call each other out or to give feedback, right? I depend heavily on Melis, who doesn't have that power dynamic necessarily, but she's one of the investors, to host talks like this, to talk about this bias and to challenge her peers. I call them peers. I don't know, the people in her sector. I mean, we're really dependent on BFA, on Catalyst Fund, on Kawasaki, all the investors that are doing this. And as much as possible, I will continue talking about it, but also without burning bridges. So that sometimes I find a difficult dynamic.
Okay, thank you so much, Claire, for bringing that power element as well in. Maybe we'll go to Melis next because, you're on the other side of that. What is stopping?
Yeah. First, completely agree. And building on what Claire and Alexandra said, for me, it's three things that still hold us back. Because indeed, I think somebody and the participants commented, why do we have a backlash? Why are actually firms pulling back on DEI commitments when we all agree there's a commercial case here and there's a business case? And that question is really hard because I think it does come down sometimes to fear, like again, fear that you are maybe building bridges or political fear or other kinds, and that we need to obviously let go of that. I mean, first, the barriers to be overcome, I think, include data blindness still. There's not enough actually information and data around the commercial upside of investing in business models that benefit, include women, have women as the leaders. And I think we need to connect the dots, right, more between this better business performance and women's engagement. There are some case studies out there, but then, refuted. We just need more, because at that point, it's hard to ignore, right? It's not just one study, it's the standard. So that's one. The other, I think, is capital incentives. We have lots of debates with investors around this. Like, should you set targets? If you set a target, are you not undermining your own mission because you're actually investing in a woman-led businesses because it's a woman-led business, not because it's a good business? That, I think, it's actually a non-conversation. Like, we invest in good businesses, but the fact that we have a mandate or a target helps us go deeper in finding the businesses in sectors where women do play a bigger role, where women do found innovative companies. And that's a push, right? That I think a lot of investors are simply disregarding the value of it. And I think it's actually a very, very important trigger. And then third is capacity. I do think we touched on this earlier with a Kawasaki colleague. And I think both founders and investors need more tools and capital to sometimes go deeper in implementing these gender inclusive strategies. Not again in moral terms, in commercial ones, which then justifies, I think, the value per dollar of these additional resources, right, that go to build capacity. So if I had like an ask, I would say, why don't we say to every funder, like in the capital stack, okay, could we, for every dollar that goes into an early stage investment, also add, $2 of capacity for deepening the gender, climate, data, and design capabilities, and also to tell the stories so that we have more shared data to continue build the case.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Maëlys. And lastly, to you, Chukwuebuka, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think my first thought is what you mentioned at the beginning, which is data. So we still do not yet have data that is really disaggregated by gender to really show, yes, I've given this figure that 90% of women determine the use of energy in the homes, but we need to have data that goes down, you could say, to the unit economics. How can we show really at a unit economics level that if we design better for women, this is, what exactly is the dollar? Is there going to be like a 70% increase, a 30% increase? And that's really, we need to get that number. And yes, we can get that number, as Emily said, is that we are still not as funded as we should be on the TA side, or, on that aspect that allows us to go deeper. We have a lot of questions that when you go to your IC, a lot of questions come up, but there's only so much you can answer. The data is not there. We all complain that we don't have data in Africa, but to get that data, we need to invest in it. We need to commission various studies and all that. So I think those are the two things. We don't yet have enough data for, data that people can no longer ignore, because it's one thing to tell me that people that use my system is 90% women, but if I can tell you that by investing in women, you would definitely increase your revenue or your gross margin or net margin by X%, that becomes more realistic to you and you begin to listen to me. But then also, yes, Kawisafi is doing this in-depth annual reviews, or we're asking for this quarterly reviews, but there's a cost to it. And yeah, some people would love to do that, but the resource is not there, and we would love to do more. We need more of that resource in a way. So I would say it's that, and then unfortunately it's also time. Yeah, there's a lot of unlearning and relearning that needs to be done, even by those that really could say are genderless investors. Sometimes you catch yourself, some things falling through the cracks, and you have to unlearn and relearn. And yeah, so obviously with time we get better at it as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. As in, there's a lot of rich information that has come out of that, and I hope everyone can take something back. We don't currently have time for the questions, unfortunately, but we are going to take your questions back and get back to you with the responses to that. So thank you for those who have sent in any. I think we've gotten a lot of rich information, but before we end, I'd love to say thank you again to our panelists for joining this conversation and for joining the research that led to this conversation. We've heard about the power dynamics from the startups and the fact that it is us. That's a really interesting, thing to hear from Alexandra. We've also had, Chukwuebuka with a very honest opinion on the fact that we need to be better telling that commercial story, and the data as well that has been brought up by Maëlys and yourselves, and the fact that it costs money. So thank you all so much for that. For now, I will turn our attention to the last piece, which is to hear from Kotuda Katsuya, who's a professional officer at UNIDO, who's going to be giving us our closing, who's going to be giving the closing remarks on behalf of UNIDO.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Phoebe, and thank you to our distinguished partners, Alexandra, Chukwuebuka, and Gray and Marys, and for sharing such a powerful insight from the front lines of gender smart climate innovation. And my deep appreciation to FSD Africa and BF Global and the Catalyst Fund for their collaboration on this research. Today's discussion with a gender brief report made one point clear. Gender climate lens investing is not only impact work, but it is also core business and investment strategy. From the research and the dialogue today, two clear messages emerged. The first one is for startups. gender inclusion improves commercial performance. When women are intentionally engaged, adoption and retention increase and customer acquisition costs fall. To unlock that value, startup must treat gender data as a strategic asset with using the gender disaggregated metrics or data, which is including retention or LTV, such kind of business data to demonstrate business value itself. Second one is for investors. Gender and climate cannot be just a footnote in investment memos. Structural gender climate due diligence reveals better opportunity and reduces risk for investment. Furthermore, what works is blending capital with technical assistance to help startups design gender inclusive and climate smart business models. So based on today's dialogue, the opportunity is very clear. The return and the impact on financial, social, and environmental are too significant to overlook. So at UNIDO, we will continue advancing this agenda together with BFA Global through the project called ACIF, Adaptation SMEs Innovation Facility, ensuring that startups and investors can translate gender inclusion into climate resilience and scalable growth. So let's keep this momentum beyond today's session. Please stay connected with us, UNIDO and BFA Global, for getting update on our work. Thank you so much for having a very great opportunity. Back to you, Phoebe.
Thank you so much, Shahuda. It's a pleasure to have you here and for supporting this work. So as a final one, please feel free to look us up on our LinkedIn pages and all other social media. You will see the report was launched there a couple of weeks ago. And there is a QR code on your screen from which you can download the report, which has significantly more than we've been able to cover today. So thank you all so much for joining the session. Hopefully it's been of interest. And if you have further questions, please reach out to us and we will try to answer them. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Phoebe, for
Thank you,
hosting us.
Phoebe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.